While we can edit the parameters of a selected node in the parameter editor, hard handles that display in the 3D viewport allow us to control a parameter on the node. This is useful if you don't want to switch back and forth between the view and the parameter editor to find a parameter that you want to update. So in this simple example, I have the poly extrude, and we have a few parameters that show up in this hard handle. To move the hard handle, left click and drag in the top bar. You can also resize the hard handle and how that shows up by left clicking and dragging on the edges to the left or to the right. Right click for the context menu. In here we have a few options, so we can lock the position, for example. So now we cannot move that hard handle around. Right click again to undo that. Right click and you have the option to undock these parameters. Right click again to dock all of them, and you have the option to undock the stack or to undock all of the parameters. Now you can move them around. Each one of those is now a separate hard handle. You can move them around and put them where you want them. Now currently we only have divisions, distance and inset. So how can we add another hard handle? Well, let's say we want twist, for example. We can go to the parameter editor and then left click and drag the twist parameter, that property, into the 3D scene view. And as you can see, that will show up. Now we can leave it as is, or we can dock that with the other parameters. And so now we have the twist hard handle, which allows us to control the twist parameter on the node. Another interesting is you can right click in here and then click lock parameter, for example. So now we cannot change that. Same thing in the parameter editor, you will see that is locked. If you try to change that, it's going to snap back to that value. So this means we don't have to navigate to the parameter editor to do something like this. If you want to lock it, you can just do that right here in the hard handle. You can also right click and select to lock all parameters, for example. And again, we can do this without having to navigate to the parameter editor. You can also display a title, and you can double click to edit the title. What may also be useful is persistent hard handles. You can right click and select persistent. You will notice that the persistent hard handle is indicated by this red dot. A persistent hard handle will stay in the view when you switch between nodes. Sometimes they will be grayed out. This happens when you use incompatible tools such as the view tool. So if they are grayed out, switch to another tool such as the handle tool, for example. So in this example, I have the merge node selected. The display flag is set on that, but I can still see that persistent hard handle for the poly extrude node. And if I make changes in here, that is going to reflect in the parameters for that node, meaning that we can update the parameters on that node even though we don't have it selected. Turn off the persistent handle by right clicking on the handle and click persistent again to toggle that off. You also have some of the other options that I mentioned, such as making the current values the default or to revert the parameters to default. Here, for example, I will revert the parameters to the default values. And as you can see, that is going to update in the parameters for the node. I did not have to go to the parameter editor for that. And so again, if you are doing some interactive modeling, this gives you a lot of flexibility to keep working in the scene viewer without having to go back and forth between that and the parameter editor. You can press and hold Control and left click and drag on the top bar of the hard handle, in this case the stack. A red line will appear and that is going to ungroup or undock that top hard handle. Press and hold Shift and left click and drag on that top bar. When we approach another hard handle, that is going to give us a green line, which will indicate that when we let go on there, that is going to dock those handles. And they don't have to be the same size. You can say I can dock different sized hard handles as well. I'll just take this one off again and then right click on it and select delete. That is going to remove that slider hard handle from the viewport. You can toggle the visibility of the hard handles with Shift and F2 if you want to temporarily toggle the visibility of those. It's not just sliders that can be hard handles. You can also have checkboxes or drop-down menus or even buttons as hard handles, and you can dock those with the other hard handles. We can also set preferences for the hard handles. So I'll go to Edit, Preferences, and Hard Handles. For example, we can draw the background. I will enable that. We can click here to set the color, or we can set the alpha, for example. I will exaggerate that and set that to 0.5, click Apply. And we can see the background of those hard handles are now drawn in this darker color. So you can also display the title. Now to edit a title, you can double click on that title. I'll just click apply here. You will see currently it shows divisions. I'll just disable that. Another interesting thing is you can show a toolbar. I'll enable that. And here, for example, you can choose to pin this, so you cannot move that around. You can lock the parameters. Okay, we've seen how to do this previously, but here we have the ability to do that using these buttons in a toolbar. Okay, so that was a quick look at HUD handle preferences.